background with that. So I'm also including that because I think it's important in this case especially. We need to understand really like an Indo-Tibetan perspective on these things. Okay, so now to the topic itself. So Dutsi Ningpo, or Amrita Hridaya. We always talk about the four tantras, but actually the four tantras are a simplified name. The real name is the heart of nectar tantra, the ambrosia heart tantra. Like that is the four tantras. It's the heart, the essence of nectar tantra, right? So you can see that is the essential name of what we're studying, right? And of course it's a long name like ambrosial heart tantra, the secret oral instructions of the 8 branches of the science of healing, right? So in that, when I was thinking like, what's like the most core aspect that we need to understand? I mean, that's the first name, the first word of the four tantras of the title is Dutsi. Okay, so it must be something very essential. And you can see in the root tantra, the tree of health and disease, this is the subject of our conference. We have the flowers and fruits, longevity, freedom from disease, as well as dharma, wealth, and happiness. And as you can see, these are very much relative this life goals that we're seeking to achieve, but also they lead us towards a more transcendent, or towards we can have a higher spiritual awakening that comes as a result of our body being healthy and harmonized and so on, right? So we can see that this Amrita, this Dutsi, right? The heart of Amrita is the key to how to grow our tree of health and disease and make the best possible flowers and fruits. All right, so what does Amrita mean? Literally, means not, and Rita means dead. So it means not dead. Okay, so that means immortal. So it's very interesting. When we talk Amrita, we think of like a nectar, a fluid, or some kind of substance, but the literal meaning is deathless. But of course, this is one of the terms that possibly has one of the widest spectra of different meanings, different contexts, in so many situations. I mean, this is a summary of one dictionary's entry, and I shortened it a lot, yeah? I took out a lot of things. But you can see how many different meanings of Amrita there are. So this is from a Common Sanskrit dictionary. So, not dead, immortal, imperishable, indestructible, or eternal, right? And then various aspects, like what causes immortality and so forth. Then the most common meaning we typically think of is the nectar of immortality, the beverage of the gods that was mythologically produced by the churning of the ocean, which is a myth, a story that we'll discuss in a little bit. Then it's a name of various different deities. One of them, for example, Dhanvantari, or in Tibetan Tanglavar, who is one of the drum songs within the medicine Buddha Mandala, who's also coming in this churning story. And then also it's, one thing I was quite surprised, so of course, as many of you guys know me, I took this and then, researched in a very, very large, this subject never ends, actually. And so in doing this research, I probably could write a couple 100-page book on larger cultural context of this stuff. But in that, I found that the story of the birth of Garuda in the Indian mythology, the Garuda bird, who, as you guys know, is also very closely connected in Vajrayana Buddhism, as well as in Sowa Rigpa, is directly connected to the story of Amrita and the churning of the ocean. And I found also very interestingly that even in some other cultures, you'll have eagles connected to the equivalent of Amrita in other, like, for example, European traditions. And then we don't have to go through all of these, of course. One who drinks or eats Amrita is a god, right? Is an immortal, right? And this is also a parallel that you find in so many of the, European mythological traditions and so forth. Then you can see various substances and plants are attributed as Amrita. So there's a variety of arura, the myrobalan. There frequently alcohol has some connection. There's what's called soma, which I won't even start to talk about because that's too big of a subject. It's an antidote against poison. It's water, ghee or clarified butter, milk, food or substance, anything wonderful and sweet, right? So we talk a lot about transforming food into nectar, transforming medicine into nectar, and so forth, right? So all of these things it's more using this like ambrosial, life-giving kind of aspect of the definition than it's attributed to various different substances. And then gold and liquid mercury, quicksilver. And another very interesting thing is the moon. We find again and again references to or connections between this nectar or amrita and the moon, which we'll see as we go in. We're going to talk about it in various aspects. So many different aspects related to Sowa Rigpa and related to the Vajrayana anatomy and yogic process are connected to the moon and nectar. So it's a very, very interesting thing. Okay, so this is Amrita. And so I'm using also, and you can see in English language, very commonly they'll use ambrosia or nectar as a translation, right? So the fascinating thing is actually ambrosia is literally the exact same word as Amrita, right? Because abrosia, right, means not mortal. Exactly the same meaning. In the same way, nectar. Nek is death and tar is overcoming, right? So you can see there is this link. I like to think when doing this research that perhaps this is a concept that predates, of course, predates the division of languages. You could say predates the Tower of Babel or something, but possibly it's even earlier because as soon as we became aware of our mortality, as soon as individual beings, we became really aware that our lives are finite and that we have to come to terms with death, there must then be some way of transcending it, some stories or some ideas of how we can go beyond this birth and death cycle. And it's embedded into our languages, it's embedded into our mythology, it's embedded into our experience of physicality. Right? And of course, this is explained that Sanskrit and Greek and Latin and English, not Estonian, these are all Indo-European languages. So according to linguistics, these all came from a very, very ancient root language. So people that study this Indo-European tradition and comparing different cultures and how their languages fit together in different levels and compare stories and mythology, would say that this is, there are some themes that go very, very, very far back into our, you can say, our genetic or our cultural DNA, right? So I think that's a very fascinating thing. And it's far older than Buddhism. It's also far older than Hinduism, right? So when Shakyamuni Buddha was in the world, this is a concept that would have been a very just part of life, right? In the same way, even the Drongson, thousands of years before, also this would have been just part of their worldview, part of their experience, right? So it's not that this is a sectarian concept either. So here's the definition of the Greek words. We don't have to go through these in too much detail, but basically it's also the food of the gods, which conferred immortality on those who took it. Often they will say that ambrosia is more the food and nectar is more the juice or the fluids. Also, there's an interesting connection to being an antidote to poisons, which we'll see also even in the four tantras. They mention, so I went through, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I went through the four tantras with the aid of modern technology. We can search every mention of the word dutsi in the four tantras. So I wanted to see where did that word come up, in which kind of context. So in the treatment of poisons was a very common, there was a few references to it. And then nectar also, aside from being a fluid, it also can be this liquid sensation that bees are eating. It's like the essence of the flowers. Right? That's why I put that image on the very front of the bee eating the nectar and so on. All right, so that's just a basic introduction. What is Amrita, right? So, so then I want to just describe briefly a little bit the mythological references of the story, of where did this nectar come from. Of course, there's so many ways of relating to these mythological stories. I think for many people they're cute or they're archaic or they point to maybe a pre-logical society or so forth, but actually in the past this was a very profound way of passing wisdom on. And it's a way of passing on knowledge to young people that then as they mature, the levels of meaning deepens and deepens. And actually there's so much knowledge encoded in these mythological stories. This is an image from Angkor Wat. I don't know if any of you guys have been to Angkor Wat, but the entire periphery of the main temple is a motif of the churning of this ocean to produce the Amrita. And you have 54 devas and 54 asuras, which add up to 108, and there's various levels of cosmological and numerological significance and so forth.